Boy interrupts judge in court, exposes secret that no one saw coming. Courtroom 6B was silent, the air thick with judgment. The prosecutor had just delivered his final blow, a damning statement that painted the defendant, Marcus Doyle, as a heartless killer. Marcus sat frozen at the defense table, his sunken eyes devoid of fight. The gavel hovered in the judge's hand, poised to fall like a guillotine sealing his fate. And then, "Stop the trial!" The words cracked through the air like lightning. Every head snapped toward the back of the courtroom. A small figure had leapt to his feet, an 11-year-old boy, thin, breathless, eyes blazing with something far bigger than fear, truth. "Marcus didn't do it! He's innocent!" the boy shouted, his voice echoing off the walls like a warning siren. The judge's hand froze midair. Her lips parted slightly, stunned, before they pressed into a sharp, angry line. "Who is that child?" someone whispered. "Is this a stunt?" "Security, get him out now," the judge snapped, slamming her gavel down. "This is a court of law, not a playground." But the boy didn't flinch. He took a step forward, eyes locked on the judge, and shouted with all the strength his lungs could give him. "I saw the real man. He forced a blonde woman into his car. It wasn't Marcus. I saw it with my own eyes." Gasps exploded like firecrackers across the courtroom. Marcus turned slowly in his seat, disbelief and confusion flooding his exhausted face. His attorney froze mid-sentence, completely blindsided. The prosecutor paled, his smug expression cracking for the first time all day. The judge's fury intensified. "Bailiff, remove him immediately!" she barked. Her voice was meant to restore order, but it only heightened the chaos. The courtroom was erupting. Reporters leapt to their feet. Cameras swung to capture every second. Spectators craned their necks. Court officers swarmed like hornets. The bailiff rushed toward the boy, but Eli Turner stood his ground. "If you let this continue, you're sending the wrong man to prison. I can prove it," he yelled, eyes glistening now, not with fear but desperation. The bailiff reached him, grabbing his arm roughly. "Let go! Please, just listen!" Eli begged, fighting against the grip. His sneakers squeaked violently across the polished floor as he was dragged away. But he kept shouting, his voice ragged and raw. "I saw the man. I saw what he did. I saw his face. It wasn't Marcus. You're making a terrible mistake." The judge stood now, slamming her gavel so hard it seemed to shake the room. "Order! This court will have order!" But it was too late. A ripple of something dangerous had been released into the air. Doubt. And Eli's words had landed like a bomb. One reporter slipped out of the room, whispering urgently into her phone. Another snapped pictures of the boy being restrained, shouting back toward the bench. "Judge, who is he? Is he a witness? Why hasn't he been called?" The judge's face was stone. "Court will recess for 10 minutes, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Remove that child now." As Eli was yanked toward the exit, he twisted around one last time, planting his feet with everything he had left. He screamed over the roar of voices, his voice rising above them all like a siren in the fog. "You're all ignoring the truth just because I'm a kid. But I saw what happened." And then he was gone, dragged out into the hallway, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind him. The courtroom sat stunned. The judge stared at her bench, her composure visibly cracking. The defense attorney leaned over to Marcus, who still stared at the doors like they might open again and let the boy back in. In the hallway, Eli collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. His heart thundered in his chest like a war drum. His hands were shaking. He could still feel the bailiff's fingers digging into his arm, still hear the judge's cold dismissal in his ears. Just a child. That's all they saw. Not a witness, not a truth teller, just a kid. But Eli Turner had seen something that no one else had. He had watched a man, not Marcus, force a woman into a car. He remembered the color of the vehicle, the dent on the bumper, the panic on the woman's face, and he remembered what it felt like to stand frozen behind a tree, too afraid to help. And now, because no one believed him, because they refused to believe a child, an innocent man was about to lose everything. Although Eli had been dragged out of the courtroom like a troublemaker, his words had struck a nerve. The courtroom buzz refused to settle, and the judge, despite her stern denial, couldn't ignore the seed of doubt he'd planted. The room was silent, too silent. The towering bookshelves loomed like silent judges, packed with thick, leather-bound volumes of Law and Power. At the far end of the room sat Judge Eleanor Grayson, her steel-gray eyes fixed coldly on the boy seated before her. Eli Turner looked small in the oversized leather chair, his feet barely brushing the floor, his knees bouncing beneath the table. But there was no fear in his eyes now, only urgency. The door shut behind them with a heavy, echoing thud. The bailiff stood nearby, arms crossed, unmoving. The ticking of a grandfather clock filled the space between Eli's heartbeat and the rising weight of the moment. "Tell me what you think you saw, Mr. Turner," Judge Grayson said, her tone clipped, calculated. She didn't say Eli. She didn't smile. She didn't offer comfort, because to her this was just a disruption, a child, a mistake. But Eli leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. "It was around 4 months ago," he began, voice steady but rushed, "in Maplewood Park. I was riding my bike, near the lake, by the old bridge. That's when I saw them." Judge Grayson didn't blink. "Them? A man and a woman. He was yelling. I couldn't hear exactly what he said, but it was angry, aggressive. She tried to back away, but he grabbed her arm and pulled her hard." Eli's fingers tightened. His knuckles turned white. She had blonde hair. She was scared. She was screaming, crying. He looked around like he didn't want anyone to see. Then he shoved her into a blue car. Dark blue. A sedan. There was a dent in the back bumper. I remember that. He sped off and she didn't get out. He paused, breath hitching. "I told my mom. She said it was probably just a fight. She didn't believe me. No one did." Judge Grayson raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And you're certain this happened? You're absolutely sure it was 4 months ago?" "Yes, ma'am." Her voice sharpened. "Do you know what you're accusing someone of, young man?" Eli met her gaze head on. "I know what I saw, and I know Marcus wasn't the man in the park." A long pause. Then Judge Grayson exhaled, slow and condescending. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, her voice now icy and dismissive. "Eli, this is a murder trial. This isn't a school play or some adventure mystery. An innocent person will not walk free because of a child's imagination. Do you understand me?" The words struck like a slap, but Eli didn't flinch. "I'm not making this up," he said quietly. "You expect me to delay a trial, one built on months of investigation, DNA evidence, testimony, because a boy says he saw something in a park months ago?" She snapped. He didn't answer. She continued. "This isn't a game, Mr. Turner, and you are not a detective." "No," Eli said, his voice trembling now, not with fear but rage. "But neither are you if you let the wrong man go to prison just because you didn't believe a kid." The bailiff shifted. Judge Grayson stood. For a moment she stared at him, eyes hard, unreadable. Then she moved to her desk, picked up a folder, and opened it with slow deliberation. "Your behavior disrupted a federal proceeding. That alone could have earned you contempt of court," she said without looking up. "But I will speak with both attorneys, privately. If your story leads to anything substantial, they will decide how to proceed." "But," Eli began, "you will not return to the courtroom unless requested. Am I clear?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded to the bailiff. "Escort him out." As Eli was led toward the door, he glanced back once more. Judge Grayson hadn't moved. Her face was stone. The moment the courtroom doors swung open, Ruth Turner stormed in like a thundercloud on legs. Nurse scrubs half-buttoned, hair tied in a messy bun, exhaustion in her eyes and fury trailing behind her like smoke. She didn't glance at the whispering spectators or the security guard who had escorted her son out. Her gaze locked straight onto Eli, and it burned. "What did you do?" she hissed through clenched teeth as she grabbed his wrist. "Mom, just listen." "Don't talk. Not one word." She yanked him down the corridor, her grip ironclad, her footsteps loud enough to echo through the marble hallway. Eli stumbled to keep up, his breath catching, but he didn't resist. Not physically. Emotionally, though, he was screaming inside. She didn't stop until they reached the elevator. She jabbed the button like it had personally offended her. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she snapped, eyes wide with disbelief. "Interrupting a trial? A murder trial, Eli. Do you want us sued? Arrested? Eli opened his mouth to speak, but Ruth wasn't finished. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed me. And for what? Some fantasy about a woman in a park? That was months ago. You don't even know what you saw. But I do, Eli shouted, voice cracking. I know what I saw. I remember every second of it. He pulled her into a car. She was screaming. It wasn't Marcus. Mom, I swear it wasn't. The elevator dinged. She shoved him inside, then turned to press the ground floor button with such force it made a hollow thunk. She turned to face him. Her voice was quieter now, but it cut even deeper. You're not a detective. You're a child. You don't get involved in these things. You don't stand up in courtrooms and accuse people of murder. That's not how the world works. Eli felt his chest tighten, as if her words had vacuumed the air out of the room. That's the problem, he muttered. No one listens to the truth if it comes from someone small. Ruth looked at him for a long moment, like she didn't even recognize her own son anymore. The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. The truth? She repeated. The truth is that you're just a kid who's watched too many crime shows. This isn't your place, Eli. You don't get to make it your place. And just like that, she stepped out. The silence in the car was deafening. Eli followed her through the lobby, through the glass doors, out into the blinding daylight. The courthouse loomed behind them like a mountain of power that had rejected him completely. Photographers stood outside, snapping pictures, hoping to catch a quote. One reporter even stepped forward. Eli, did the judge hear your testimony? Is there a chance Marcus might go free? Ruth raised a hand. No comment. Stay away from my son. Eli wanted to speak, wanted to scream the truth until the window shattered, but he was already being pulled again, guided like a prisoner toward their rusted old car. Once inside, the silence wrapped around him like a straitjacket. Rain began tapping on the windshield, soft at first, then harder, as if the sky itself couldn't stand the weight of what had just happened. Eli stared out the window, his reflection blurring behind the raindrops. He felt hollow, like something inside him had cracked. He had stood in front of a courtroom. He had risked everything to speak the truth. And not one adult believed him, not the judge, not the lawyers, not even his own mother. The very people who told him growing up to tell the truth had silenced him the second he did. Ruth drove in silence. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles pale. She didn't speak, didn't glance over, not even when the light caught the wet streak sliding down Eli's cheek. He wiped it away before she could see, because if she wouldn't believe him, then she didn't deserve to see him cry. As the city passed by in a blur of wet concrete and headlights, Eli made himself a quiet promise. If they wouldn't fight for the truth, he would, alone, if he had to. The clouds hung low over Maplewood Park, casting a heavy gray light that mirrored the weight in Eli's chest. The world had moved on. Laughter rang from the playground, joggers passed by without a second glance, and parents strolled with their toddlers, oblivious. To them, this place was peaceful, normal, safe, but not to Eli Turner. Not anymore. His sneakers crunched against the gravel path as he walked slowly, retracing every step he had taken months ago, the day everything changed. He could still feel it, the unease in his gut, the chill in the air, the way that man had looked over his shoulder before forcing the woman into the car. No one had listened, not the judge, not the police, not even his own mother. But that didn't make what he saw any less real. And if the adults wouldn't look for the truth, he would. He moved past the lake, past the empty bench he'd hidden behind that day. His eyes scanned everything, trees, shrubs, the curve of the trail, searching for anything the police might have missed. Something they never looked for in the first place. He knelt down near the bushes where he had crouched that day, pushing leaves and damp soil aside with trembling fingers. Nothing. Just dead twigs and last year's garbage. The frustration burned behind his eyes, hot and bitter. Maybe he was just a kid with a big imagination. Then something caught the light. Just a flicker, a glint of metal. Eli froze. He reached forward, heart pounding, and brushed aside the dirt. His breath caught. There it was, a small rusted keychain, partially buried in the mud, shaped like a sunflower. Its yellow petals faded, scratched and worn by time and weather, but unmistakable. He held it in his palm, staring at it like it might vanish. His fingers trembled as he turned it over. The same keychain, the exact one Alyssa had on her purse in the photo the news kept showing. Eli's pulse thundered in his ears. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't coincidence. This was real. She had been here. The woman in the park that day wasn't just some stranger. It was Alyssa Green. He swallowed hard and looked around, suddenly aware of how alone he was. A few people walked in the distance, too far to help if something happened. The keychain felt heavy in his hand now, not because of weight, but because of what it meant. This could change everything. He grabbed his phone, snapping a photo of where he found it, the angle of the trail, the background trees. Then he slid the keychain carefully into his pocket. His fingers gripped it like it was the last piece of a lifeline. But as he stood up, a new emotion settled in. Dread. If he could find this, then why hadn't the police? Or worse, had they found it and buried it? The thought made his stomach twist. What if they didn't just ignore the truth? What if they were hiding it? The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the trees and making the branches creak like bones. He looked around again. Everything seemed normal, but the park didn't feel safe anymore, not with what he knew. He started walking back toward the exit, faster now. He needed to get home. He needed to figure out what to do with what he'd found. This wasn't something he could just post online or tell a reporter. But every step he took, the keychain in his pocket seemed to burn hotter. The house was still, too still. The kind of silence that didn't bring peace, but tension. Heavy, crawling tension. The kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes until your lungs forget how to breathe. Eli Turner sat in the dark, the glow of his laptop screen casting pale blue light across his face. His room was quiet except for the faint whir of the ceiling fan and the slow, rhythmic pounding of his heart. Then, ping, an email. He blinked. The address was anonymous. No name, no subject, just a single line of text in the body. Stop. You have no idea what you're playing with. And beneath it, a sunflower emoji. Eli's fingers froze on the keyboard. For a long second, he just stared. His mouth went dry. His stomach twisted. Someone knew. Someone had seen him in the park. Someone knew about the keychain. His hand moved slowly, reaching for the mouse. He clicked to expand the email details. Nothing. Masked IP, no reply address, no attachments, just that one line. But the message was clear. Back off, or else. A cold sweat broke across the back of his neck. He slammed the laptop shut and stood up, pacing in the shadows. His mind raced with questions. How did they find me? Are they watching? Could they be outside right now? Then came the sound. Crunch. A footstep. On gravel. Right outside his window. He stopped breathing. Eli darted to the wall and pressed his back against it, straining to listen. Another step, then another. Slow, deliberate, right beneath the window frame. His window was closed, the curtains drawn. But that didn't stop the rising panic in his chest. He moved quietly, carefully, lifting the edge of the curtain just a hair. Enough to see the night outside. Nothing. Only the empty backyard, dimly lit by the distant street lamp. Trees swaying in the breeze. No figure. No car. No movement. But something was wrong. He could feel it. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and typed quickly. Mom, there's someone outside my window. 3 dots popped up. Then her reply. Don't be ridiculous, Eli, it's late. Probably just the wind. Go to sleep. He stared at the screen. His pulse thundered. They always thought he was being dramatic, overreacting, just a kid with a wild imagination. But this wasn't imagination. This was a warning, a threat, and he knew it. He turned back to the window again, just in time to see the shadow move. It was fast, too fast for him to catch any details, but the shape was unmistakable. Tall, broad, human. Someone had been watching. Eli stumbled backward, heart slamming against his ribs like a prisoner trying to break free. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He checked the locks. Window, shut, door, locked. Still, he didn't feel safe, not even close. He slid to the floor, back against the wall, breathing hard. And that's when the next thought hit him. The car, that dark blue sedan with the dented bumper, the one he'd seen in the park, the one he'd described to the judge, the one no one cared about because he was just a kid. If someone was threatening him now, it meant he was getting close. And if the adults weren't going to help, he had to keep digging, even if it meant doing it alone. Eli got up, turned his laptop back on, and pulled up every public traffic camera archive he could access. Local news stations, city archives, social media pages with tagged posts in the area. Anything that might have captured that car. His fingers flew over the keyboard, eyes darting from video stills to street names. He traced the road leading from the park, where the abduction had taken place, to nearby intersections. Then finally, on a grainy security cam image outside a corner gas station, he saw it. Dark blue, rear dent, partial license plate, B47Y3. His pulse spiked. He had something. He copied the image, enhanced it as best he could, and ran the plate through every online forum and open database he could find. It was limited, but after 15 minutes of cross-checking local car reports, parking violations, and obscure online threads, a name surfaced, Derek Dex Harper. He clicked. The profile photo hit him like a punch. That was the man. The same man he saw grab the woman in the park. The same face burned into his memory since that terrifying day. Eli's stomach churned. Dex Harper had a record: domestic assault, harassment, 2 restraining orders, and one of his ex-girlfriends, Alyssa Green. The name glared back at him like a verdict. Eli pushed away from the desk, pacing again. They knew he'd found something. That's why they sent the email. That's why someone was outside his window tonight. They weren't just warning him. They were watching him, ready to silence him. He grabbed his phone again. His thumb hovered over Officer Ramirez's number. Should he call her? Would she believe him now? No, not yet. He needed more. Something they couldn't ignore. Something undeniable. Because one thing was now crystal clear. He was closer than ever. But the closer he got, the more dangerous it became. Eli sat back down, pulled up a new tab, and began digging into Dex Harper's connections, looking for any known associates, addresses, anything that could point to where Dex had gone. The game had changed. This wasn't about getting attention anymore. This was about survival. And if the man who killed Alyssa thought a scare email and a couple footsteps would stop Eli Turner, he didn't know who he was dealing with. But uncovering Dex Harper's identity was only the beginning, because the moment Eli got too close to the truth, the hunter became the hunted. The trees closed in around him, their branches clawing at the sky like twisted hands. Eli's lungs burned as he tore through the winding trail, his sneakers slipping against the damp dirt. Behind him, the sound of crashing footsteps grew louder, closer. Every breath felt like a countdown, every heartbeat like a warning bell. Dex was gaining, the same man who had haunted Eli's memories for months, the same man who had grabbed Alyssa and vanished without a trace. And now he was chasing Eli like prey. The boy risked a glance over his shoulder. There he was, Dex Harper, broad shoulders, angry eyes, a monster unleashed. "You should have kept your mouth shut," Dex bellowed, his voice echoing through the trees like thunder. Eli's foot caught on a root, and he stumbled, but didn't fall. His hands scraped the ground as he pushed forward, heart slamming against his ribs like a trapped animal. He wasn't going to make it. He could feel it. Dex was too fast, too close. The trail was too empty. No witnesses, no help. Until voices, up ahead, just past the bend, people. Eli rounded the corner and burst into a clearing where a group of 5 joggers stood stretching near a set of benches. Their heads snapped toward him, startled. "Help!" Eli screamed. "He's trying to kill me!" The joggers barely had time to react before Dex emerged behind him, panting, his expression contorted with fury and something far more terrifying: intent. He skidded to a halt the moment he saw the group. "Hey!" one of the joggers yelled, stepping forward protectively. Dex froze. His eyes darted to Eli, then to the joggers, calculating. His chest heaved. His fists were clenched. And then he smiled. Not the kind of smile that meant safety, the kind that made your blood go cold. He took one step forward, just enough to get within earshot of Eli, who had collapsed near the bench, gasping for breath. And in a voice so low the others couldn't hear, he said, "You don't deserve to live if you keep pushing this." Eli's breath caught in his throat. The words didn't just sound like a threat, they sounded like a promise. The joggers began to crowd around, some pulling out their phones. Dex backed away, that cold smile still stretching across his face. "Kid's just confused," he muttered loud enough for them to hear. Didn't mean to scare him. And then like a ghost, he disappeared into the trees. No one tried to follow. No one really knew what had just happened. But Eli did. He sat on the ground, arms wrapped around himself, the fear still surging through his veins like electricity. His throat was dry. His body shook. He had come face to face with the man who killed Alyssa. And now that man had told him, in no uncertain terms, "You're next." One of the joggers, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, knelt beside him. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Eli shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he whispered. They waited with him until a park security guard arrived. Eli didn't tell the full story. Not yet. He just said a man had chased him, threatened him. The report was filed. The officer offered to call his mother, but Eli declined. He wasn't ready for another lecture about imagination or boundaries. Instead, he walked home alone. Each step felt heavier than the last. His thoughts spun like a storm. Dex had found him. That wasn't a coincidence. He was being followed, hunted, and no one would believe him. Back in his room, Eli locked the door and shut the curtains tight. He sat at his desk and stared at the sunflower keychain, still scratched, still silent. It felt like it should have glowed or pulsed or something, anything to match the weight of what it meant. But it didn't. It was just a small thing, just like him. And that's what made it all so maddening. He had proof. He had seen the truth. But every time he tried to speak up, he was silenced by judges, by lawyers, by his own mother. And now, the silence had become deadly. Dex Harper wasn't just dangerous, he was confident, because he thought the world would keep ignoring Eli. But Eli wasn't the same scared kid anymore. He was done running, done being dismissed. Dex had made one mistake. He didn't kill Eli today. And tomorrow, Eli would make sure he regretted it. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. Fan-num. Eli sat hunched over his laptop, the light from the screen the only thing illuminating his bedroom. Rain tapped steadily against the window, but he didn't hear it. His mind was locked in, racing faster than his fingers as he dug deeper into Alyssa Green's past, searching for any thread that might unravel the truth. That's when he found her. Rachel Daniels, Alyssa's best friend, her college roommate, the one person who had stood in front of every news camera after Alyssa's disappearance and screamed for justice when no one else would. Eli clicked on a video link. Rachel's voice played through the speakers, shaky, tear-choked, but strong. "I know something happened to her. I know it wasn't just a random attack, and I won't stop until the truth comes out." That interview was dated 2 weeks after Alyssa went missing, and it was the last public appearance Rachel ever made. Eli's eyes narrowed. He searched every corner of the internet, forums, news sites, obituaries, police bulletins. Nothing. No updates, no follow-ups, no answers. It was like Rachel had vanished into thin air. His gut twisted. People didn't just disappear, not without reason, and not people like Rachel, who had been so loud, so determined, so close to the truth, unless someone had wanted her gone. Eli opened a missing persons database. Rachel's name wasn't there. No official report, no ongoing search. No one was even looking for her. That made his blood run cold. Because if Rachel had known something, something real, something dangerous, and the system had ignored her, just like it had ignored him, that meant she had been silenced, and no one cared. The injustice burned in his chest like fire. How many people had to disappear before someone listened? First Alyssa, Now Rachel, and next, him. He stood up from his desk, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from fury. Rachel had tried to speak. She had shouted for help, but no one in power had lifted a finger. They had let her voice die in silence, just like they were trying to do to him. But Eli wouldn't let that happen, not again. Rachel's name wasn't going to vanish into the void. He was going to find out what happened to her. He was going to finish what she started. And this time, someone was going to listen, whether they wanted to or not. The sky over the old industrial district was a flat, lifeless gray. Rusted chain-link fences lined the cracked sidewalks, and rows of abandoned warehouses loomed like silent giants, forgotten relics of a world that once thrived and now whispered only secrets. Eli Turner stood at the edge of the lot, gripping the straps of his backpack. His breath fogged in the cold air as he stared at the chain-link gate, slightly ajar. According to a few obscure online posts, urban legends, and scattered rumors, this was the last place Rachel Daniels had ever been seen. He stepped inside. The silence was immediate, eerie, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that made your skin crawl, like something was watching from the shadows. Eli moved carefully, weaving between rusted barrels and broken crates. Every footstep echoed too loud, each creak of rotted floorboards making his heart skip. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but something in his gut told him Rachel had left behind more than just rumors. Then he saw it. Near the back of the warehouse, half buried in dust and debris, something glinted faintly beneath a broken wooden plank. Eli knelt and brushed the dirt aside. His chest tightened. A charm bracelet, delicate, tarnished. One of the charms, a sunflower, was bent and cracked, the chain broken in two. It matched the sunflower keychain Alyssa once carried. And Eli remembered. Rachel had worn a sunflower bracelet in old photos. This was hers. She had been here, and she hadn't left on her own. Suddenly a sound, the soft crunch of gravel behind him. Eli spun around. A figure stood at the far end of the warehouse, dressed in a black hoodie, face obscured in shadow, not moving, just watching. Then the man stepped forward. "Give me the bracelet," he growled. Eli's heartbeat exploded in his chest. I don't know what you're talking about." The man lunged. Eli bolted. He sprinted through the warehouse, dodging debris, his sneakers pounding against the concrete. Behind him, the footsteps thundered closer. The man was fast, determined, dangerous. Eli shoved open the back door, bursting into the cold air. He ran full force into the open lot, his breath ragged, fingers clenched tight around the broken bracelet in his pocket. But the man didn't stop. "Give it to me, kid!" the voice roared behind him. Eli veered into an alley, darting around dumpsters and leaping over a stack of pallets. He could hear the man's breath now. Close, too close. Then up ahead, hope. A group of runners, 5 or 6 people, mid-jog, wearing bright vests and earbuds. Eli ran straight at them, screaming, "Help! He's chasing me! He's trying to hurt me!" The runners stopped mid-stride, startled, pulling out earbuds and turning toward the alley just as the hooded figure came skidding to a halt. One of the runners, a tall man in his 30s, stepped protectively in front of Eli. "Back off," he said, voice low but firm. The hooded man froze, his fists clenched, his eyes locked on Eli, and for a terrifying second, it looked like he might attack anyway. Then, he turned and vanished into the alley shadows, gone. Eli collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. One of the women knelt beside him, hand on his back. "You okay, kid?" Eli nodded weakly, his voice hoarse. "I need a phone. I need to call the police." 20 minutes later, red and blue lights lit up the warehouse district like a crime scene. Officer Ramirez was the first to step out of the cruiser, concern etched deep into her face. "Eli," she called. He stood up from the sidewalk where the joggers had been watching over him. His hands still trembled as he reached into his pocket. "I found this," he said, placing the broken sunflower bracelet into her gloved hand. "It belonged to Rachel Daniels. She was here. He was chasing me for it." Ramirez examined the bracelet, her expression darkening. "This is solid, Eli. This could connect her disappearance to the warehouse. Maybe even link it back to Dex Harper. But why would he send someone after a bracelet?" Eli asked. Ramirez looked him dead in the eyes. Because whatever's on that bracelet, it's the one thing they missed. And you just became the biggest threat to the people who've been hiding the truth. Eli swallowed hard. The runner stood nearby, still shaken but safe. The hooded man was gone, for now. But Eli knew what this meant. They were watching him. They wanted him silenced. But he had something now, real evidence. The broken bracelet wasn't just proof Rachel had been there. It was proof someone had tried to erase her, just like they tried to erase Alyssa. Just like they were now trying to erase him. But Eli wasn't going to let that happen. Not with the truth in his hand. Not with Rachel's voice whispering through the broken chain. Not when justice was finally within reach. The courtroom had never felt colder. Eli Turner stood just outside the heavy double doors of courtroom 7C, clutching a folder so tightly his knuckles turned white. Inside it, a bent sunflower keychain, a series of time-stamped photos, and a flash drive holding a single, bone-chilling voice recording. For weeks he'd been dismissed. By police, by the court, by his own mother, as a scared little boy with too much imagination. But not anymore, because now they were listening. It started 2 nights ago, when Officer Ramirez held Rachel's broken bracelet in her gloved hand and said the words Eli never thought he'd hear. We're reopening the case. Within 24 hours, the entire tone of the investigation shifted. Detectives combed through the warehouse Eli had escaped from. They found a hidden bloodstain beneath the floorboards, a DNA match. Rachel Daniels had been there. And suddenly, Eli wasn't just some kid with wild stories. He was a witness, a real one. The defense attorney, Mr. Callahan, a tall, sharp-eyed man with a voice like a scalpel, had asked to speak with Eli personally, not to coach him, not to downplay him, but to listen. And today, that man was calling him to the stand. Court is back in session, the bailiff announced, his voice ringing through the chamber. Eli's heart thudded in his chest as he walked forward, each step feeling like it echoed through the marrow of his bones. Marcus Doyle sat at the defense table, eyes sunken but wide with something new. Hope. The prosecution looked uneasy. As Eli took the stand, he looked out at the courtroom. The reporters, the skeptics, the same judge who once ordered him dragged out of this very room. He cleared his throat. My name is Eli Turner. I'm 13 years old. And Eli, Callahan said gently, can you tell the court what you saw the day Alyssa Green went missing? Eli nodded. He kept his voice calm, even as his palms began to sweat. I was riding my bike through Maplewood Park. I saw a man arguing with a blonde woman. She looked scared. He grabbed her arm, forced her into a dark blue sedan. There was a dent on the rear bumper. I didn't know who they were, not until I saw the news. And this wasn't Marcus Doyle, was it? No, Eli said, stronger now. It was someone else. I saw his face. It was Dex Harper. A murmur rippled through the room. Callahan walked to the evidence table and held up a plastic bag. Inside, the scratched sunflower keychain Eli had found in the park. Is this the item you discovered buried near the trail? Yes, it matches the one Alyssa had in photos. And do you have any photographic evidence of the car you saw that day? Eli nodded and opened the folder, sliding out several printed images. I found security footage. The license plate matches a vehicle registered to Dex Harper. The judge leaned forward now, studying the photos with narrowed eyes. But Callahan wasn't finished. He held up a USB drive. And finally, Eli, can you tell the court what's on this flash drive? Eli's hands trembled. It's a recording from the day I was attacked near the warehouse. It's Dex. He chased me. He tried to take the bracelet Rachel dropped, and I recorded what he said. Callahan turned to the judge. With the court's permission, the judge gave a silent nod. The audio played. At first it was static, then Eli's ragged breath, footsteps, a sharp shout. Give me the bracelet, kid. You don't deserve to live if you keep pushing this. The words dropped like bricks into the courtroom. Gasps. Silence. The prosecution tried to object. This could have been faked, but the judge raised her hand. We'll examine the file's metadata. For now, the court will accept it into the record. Callahan approached the bench. Your Honor, what we have here is more than reasonable doubt. We have a clear suspect with motive, history, and a direct threat to a key witness. Marcus Doyle is not the man who committed this crime. And this boy, despite every obstacle thrown at him, risked his life to prove it. Eli looked down, fighting the sting in his eyes. Because for the first time, he wasn't being silenced. He was being heard. The judge turned to the prosecutor. Would the state like to respond? But the prosecutor stayed seated, jaw tight, unable to form words. Outside the courthouse, cameras were already flashing. The world found out overnight. By the time the sun rose over the city, Eli Turner's name was everywhere, crawling across news tickers, filling headlines, and dominating every talk show panel across the country. 13-year-old boy blows open murder case with evidence police ignored. Teen witness outsmarts investigators, exposes true killer. How a broken keychain and a voice recording brought justice. Cameras camped outside the courthouse. Reporters elbowed each other to get closer. Microphones were thrust forward, their cords snaking across the pavement like vines trying to pull the truth into the open. And in the center of the storm was Eli. He hadn't wanted this. The spotlight, the attention, the noise. But now that it was here, he stood in it like someone twice his size. Bruised but not broken. Tired but not defeated. Flashes exploded as he stepped out of the courthouse with Officer Ramirez and his attorney. His backpack hung from one shoulder, his hoodie wrinkled, his face pale from the sleepless nights and chase-filled days. But his eyes burned with something deeper than fear. Conviction. The same reporters who once ignored his story were now shouting his name. Eli, how did you find the bracelet? Did the police really ignore you? Do you feel vindicated? Are you scared Dex Harper might come after you again? He didn't answer. Not yet. Inside, the courtroom still echoed with the impact of the audio recording. The defense's case had turned into a reckoning. Dex Harper's name was now under investigation. Prosecutors scrambled to explain how they missed so many red flags. And Marcus Doyle, who had been just days from a life sentence, now sat stunned, tears streaking down his face as hope returned like a breath of fresh air. But outside, the court of public opinion was already on fire. Talk shows dissected every detail. Hashtags trended for hours. Neary, believe Eli. Neary, sunflower justice. Neary, let the kids speak. And behind every post, every angry comment, every outrage video was the same question. How could this happen? How could a child see what the adults refused to? How could a system so proud of justice nearly bury the truth, just because it came from the mouth of a boy? And deeper still, what if Eli hadn't spoken up? What if fear had won? The nation was rattled, not just by the case, but by the mirror it held up. Eli hadn't just cracked open a trial, he had exposed a failure. And now the world was watching, not for drama, not for scandal, but because a 13-year-old boy had dared to scream when no one else would, and it had shaken the walls of power to their core. But just as the media frenzy reached its peak, when it seemed like the case had finally found its voice, a shocking new development would take everything to another level. Rachel Daniels was found. When they found Rachel Daniels, she was curled up in the corner of a dimly lit motel room on the outskirts of town, shivering beneath a threadbare blanket that reeked of mildew and fear. Her hair, once golden and vibrant, was matted and dull. Her eyes, once sharp with fire and truth, now flicked nervously toward every shadow, every creak in the wall. It had been 6 months since she vanished without a trace, 6 months of silence, 6 months of whispers, theories, and cold leads. And now, finally, 6 months of horror revealed. Eli sat quietly outside the police interview room, watching through the one-way glass as Rachel sipped hot tea from a paper cup with trembling hands. She didn't speak at first. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out, only tears. But slowly, under the steady guidance of Officer Ramirez and a trauma counselor, the dam began to break, and what spilled out shook the room to its core. "He killed her," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dex, he killed Alyssa." Ramirez leaned in, steady but firm. "Why, Rachel? Why would he do something like that?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Because, because she finally left. She broke it off for good. She was done. She blinked as if forcing herself to relive what she had spent months trying to forget. He wouldn't let her go. He said if he couldn't have her, no one could. The room fell into a still silence. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as he pressed closer to the glass, barely breathing. He had believed this all along, but hearing it from Rachel's own mouth, it made it real. Ramirez kept her voice calm. And did you see it? Rachel nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. I didn't mean to, she said. I went to the park because Alyssa said she was meeting him one last time. She didn't want to, but she thought if she faced him, he'd finally leave her alone. Rachel paused, breath catching in her throat. I hid behind a tree. I heard them arguing. He kept begging, then shouting. Then she stopped. Tears streamed down her face. He snapped. He grabbed her. She screamed. I ran. I couldn't move fast enough. I couldn't help her. And I knew if he saw me. She shook her head violently. He would have killed me too. Ramirez was silent for a beat. Did he know you were there? Rachel's eyes hardened. He found out. Not that night, but later. He sent a message. No words, just a picture. A sunflower keychain, smashed, just like the one Alyssa used to carry. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a crumpled photo, an old picture of her and Alyssa on a beach laughing. It was stained, worn from being folded and refolded 1,000 times. I went into hiding. I didn't know what else to do, Rachel whispered. I thought if I disappeared, he wouldn't come for me. Her voice cracked. But he never stopped watching. The words struck like a knife. Eli felt his breath catch in his throat. This is what she had lived with for months. Fear, silence, isolation. Not because she was weak, but because she knew speaking the truth would cost her everything. And it almost had. But now finally the silence was broken. Ramirez gently laid a hand on Rachel's shoulder. You did the right thing. You're safe now. Rachel didn't answer. She just nodded, once, and stared down at the photo in her hands like it was the last piece of her former life still intact. But just when Eli thought the worst was behind him, when the truth had finally begun to surface, another shadow emerged, darker and more dangerous than anything before. This time they came after his family. It came in a plain envelope. No return address, no markings, just a single white envelope, slipped through the mail slot and left sitting on the kitchen counter like any other letter. Harmless, ordinary. But when Eli tore it open, the blood drained from his face. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, slightly tilted, but unmistakable. His mother, Ruth Turner, standing outside the grocery store, keys in hand, smiling at something off camera. A candid moment, innocent, until you realized what it meant. It wasn't the photo itself that made Eli's hands tremble. It was the message scrawled across the back in black ink. Back off. She's not safe anymore. Eli dropped the photo as if it burned him. His breath hitched, chest tightening, vision blurring around the edges. This wasn't just a warning, it was a threat, and it was personal. They had followed her, they had watched her, and that meant they were closer than he ever imagined. He bolted to the window, yanking back the curtains. The street outside looked calm, normal. Kids rode bikes. A woman walked her dog. But now, Eli saw danger in every shadow, every parked car, every flicker behind a window. He ran upstairs and locked the door, hands shaking as he pulled out his phone. Officer Ramirez, he whispered when she picked up. They sent me something. It's my mom. They're watching her. She didn't hesitate. Stay put. I'm on my way. Within 15 minutes, patrol cars surrounded the Turner home. Ramirez stormed inside, eyes scanning every corner. Eli handed her the photo. Her jaw clenched. I was afraid of this, she muttered. You've rattled too many cages, Eli. The people you exposed, Dex and the ones protecting him, they're getting desperate. Eli's heart sank. You mean there's more than just Dex? Ramirez exhaled slowly, as if bracing herself for what came next. Yes, she said. We've been following a lead, and we think someone inside the department has been helping cover this up. For years, Eli's stomach twisted. A cop? Ramirez nodded. Not just any cop. Someone high-ranking. Someone who made evidence disappear. Who redirected attention away from Dex when Alyssa's case first opened. And now that you've dragged the truth into the light, they're trying to bury it again. Any way they can. Eli sat down hard on the couch. His whole world tilted. He had expected Dex to lash out. But this was betrayal on another level. If someone in uniform, someone sworn to protect, had chosen instead to protect a killer, then the corruption ran deeper than he ever imagined. Who is it? He asked. Ramirez hesitated. We don't have enough to name him. Not yet. But we have our suspicions. And I promise you, Eli, we're not stopping until we expose every last piece of this. But Eli's mind was already racing. A memory surfaced. Something small. An old interview he watched months ago. A police spokesperson dismissing Alyssa's case as a runaway incident just days after her body was found. Something about the way he said it. Flat, cold, rehearsed. Captain Merrick. Ramirez saw the look on Eli's face. What is it? I think I know who it is, Eli whispered. I think it's Captain Merrick. Ramirez's eyes narrowed. You sure? I remember his name. I remember his face. He shut it all down before it even started. Ramirez stood, her voice turning steel hard. Then we're going to find proof. And when we do, this whole thing comes crashing down. But even as she spoke, Eli's eyes drifted back to the photo of his mother. Because proof or not, the danger was already here. The storm hit just after midnight. Rain lashed against the windows of the safe house, wind howling like a warning through the dense trees surrounding the cabin. Inside, the only sounds were the steady tick of a wall clock and the soft crackle of a dying fire. Eli sat curled on the living room couch, eyes fixed on the glow of the security monitors. His mother, Ruth, had finally fallen asleep upstairs, but he couldn't close his eyes, not after the threat they'd received, not after the photograph. Not with the image of someone stalking his mother burned into his brain like a brand. Every creak of the wooden floor, every shift in the wind, made him flinch. Then he saw it. Movement. One of the perimeter cameras flickered. A blur crossed the screen, fast, low to the ground, like a shadow crawling through the storm. Eli leaned in, heartbeat hammering. He switched views. The motion sensor at the back door had triggered. Someone was out there. He grabbed his phone, hands trembling, and called Officer Ramirez directly. They're here, he whispered. Someone's outside. Back entrance. Ramirez's voice crackled through the receiver, sharp and urgent. Stay put. Lock the doors. We're 2 minutes out. 2 minutes. It might as well have been a lifetime. Eli dropped the phone and ran to the stairwell. Mom, he hissed up the stairs. Wake up now! Footsteps. A door creaked open. Ruth appeared at the top of the landing, eyes wide, still half asleep. What's wrong? But before he could answer, glass shattered. The kitchen window exploded inward, shards flying like shrapnel. A black figure rolled through the opening, landing in a crouch on the tile floor. A man, tall, drenched in rain, face hidden behind a black ski mask. A killer. Eli and Ruth both screamed. Run! Eli shouted, grabbing his mother's hand and pulling her toward the back hallway. The man lunged fast, precise, but slipped on the wet floor just long enough for them to gain distance. They bolted down the corridor. Eli slammed the emergency lock on the panic room door, just like Officer Ramirez had shown him. The heavy steel bolts clicked into place. Seconds later, fists pounded against the reinforced frame. Then, silence. The cabin was dead quiet. Ruth clutched Eli, both of them gasping for breath in the darkness. A minute passed, then 2, then sirens, the pounding of boots, doors crashing open, a voice shouting, Clear! Go left! Basement sweep now! Someone knocked on the panic room door. Eli, it's Ramirez! You're safe! He's gone! The bolts released with a hiss. Eli stepped out into a sea of officers swarming through the house like bees shaken from the hive. The intruder had vanished, slipped into the forest before the perimeter sealed, but he left behind muddy footprints, broken glass, fingerprints, and intent. He hadn't come to scare them. He had come to kill. Hours later, as the sun began to rise behind the trees, Officer Ramirez stood with Eli on the porch. The rain had stopped. The house, though shaken, stood firm. "You okay?" she asked gently. Eli nodded. "Yeah, I think so." But his face was pale. His hands still trembled. Ramirez turned serious. "That wasn't random, Eli. That man knew the layout. He knew which window was weak. He knew you were the threat." Eli looked up. "So it's not just Dex?" "No," she said grimly. "This is organized. We found burner phones, coded messages, payments linked to accounts under fake names. Someone powerful is helping him stay hidden and trying to wipe out anyone who gets too close." She paused. "But tonight, you just saved this case." Eli frowned. "How?" "You forced them to act," Ramirez said. "They exposed themselves. We have evidence now that ties this to something bigger: conspiracy, obstruction, even attempted murder. We're moving beyond a single homicide. You exposed a network." Eli stared out at the forest, rain still dripping from the leaves. He thought about Rachel, about Alyssa, about how many voices had been buried beneath fear and silence, and how close he had come to joining them. He turned to Ramirez. "Then let's finish this." Her lips curved into a tight smile. "We will." Inside the house, Ruth wept softly in the corner, overwhelmed by the fear, the chaos, the near miss. But Eli sat beside her and took her hand. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent, so still that even the creak of a shifting chair echoed like thunder. At the defense table, Dex Harper stood in chains. He didn't wear his signature smirk anymore. No confidence, no swagger. Just a pale, expressionless face and bloodshot eyes that refused to look up. Beside him, in full uniform stripped of dignity, was Captain Raymond Merrick, the cop who once swore to serve justice, but had instead buried it in lies. The judge's voice shattered the silence. "Dex Harper, for the murder of Alyssa Green, attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. This court sentences you to life in prison without parole. Captain Merrick, for aiding and abetting a known felon, destruction of evidence, and abuse of power, you are sentenced to 30 years in federal prison." The gavel came down like a gunshot. Gasps filled the air. Whispers swelled into a roar. Camera shutters clicked. Reporters scribbled furiously, and families in the gallery broke into tears. But through it all, Eli Turner remained still. He had fought for this moment with every breath he had. He had been chased, ignored, threatened, nearly killed, just to be heard. And now the truth stood tall while the guilty finally fell. At the defense table across the room, Marcus Doyle broke down as the judge turned to him. "Mr. Doyle, all charges against you have been dropped. You are free to go." He didn't move at first, as if he couldn't believe it, as if he expected someone to shout, "Wait, it's a mistake." But it wasn't. After months of being wrongly accused, sitting in a jail cell while the world branded him a monster, Marcus stepped into the aisle. His eyes swept the courtroom, then landed on Eli. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes glassy. "Thank you." Before Eli could respond, Rachel Daniels burst from the gallery and threw her arms around him. She sobbed uncontrollably, her face buried in his shoulder. "You did it!" she cried. "You saved me! You saved all of us!" Eli didn't speak. He couldn't. His chest ached too much to form words, so he held her tighter. The courtroom doors opened. Reporters surged forward like a rising tide. Microphones stretched. Cameras pointed. Flashes lit the air like lightning as Eli stepped outside. Questions flew from every direction. "Eli, how did you know it was Dex Harper? What would you say to the people who ignored you? Do you think the justice system failed?" He looked out at the sea of faces, judges, lawyers, officers, journalists, all the people who hadn't believed him when he was just a boy with a broken voice and a trembling hand holding the truth. He stepped up to the microphone and said one sentence, "I just wish someone had listened to a kid." Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything, like subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. The wind whispered softly through the golden leaves, rustling the tall grass in gentle waves. The sky above was a canvas of late afternoon light, deep blues streaked with amber, as if the world itself were exhaling after a storm long held in its lungs. Eli Turner stood at the edge of the park, the very one where it all began. The trees still stood, tall and silent, witnesses to everything they had seen. The path where he once rode his bike was still cracked and uneven. The bench where he had first hidden, first doubted, first feared, it was still there. But Eli was not the same boy. He stood alone, shoulders no longer hunched, his breath slow and steady. In his right hand, cradled carefully as if it were a sacred relic, was the broken sunflower bracelet. Rachel's bracelet, Alyssa's symbol, his proof. The metal was still scratched, the charm still dented, but it gleamed faintly in the waning light, catching the sun's final rays as they broke through the canopy of trees and spilled across Eli's face. His eyes lifted toward the sky. Above him, clouds drifted slowly, indifferent and majestic. The world had kept turning through every threat, every scream, every moment he had nearly given up. And now, after all the blood, the silence, the betrayal, there was quiet, not emptiness, peace. He remembered every moment that led him here. He remembered the gavel slamming as Marcus was wrongly sentenced. He remembered the coldness in the judge's eyes as she ordered him removed from the courtroom, screaming the truth no one wanted to hear. He remembered the click of a camera outside his window, the photo of his mother taken without her knowing, used as a weapon. He remembered the footsteps at night, the man in the black hoodie, the voice that said he didn't deserve to live. He remembered the betrayal when he realized a police officer sworn to uphold justice had been the very hand that helped hide a killer. And he remembered the disbelief, the laughter, the way adults dismissed him because his voice cracked, because he was just a kid. But he also remembered the moment Rachel was found. He remembered her whisper, "You saved me." He remembered Marcus walking out of that courtroom a free man, his eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. He remembered standing before a crowd of cameras saying the only words that mattered, "I just wish someone had listened to a kid." Eli closed his eyes now, letting the sunlight warm his face. He had been hunted. He had been silenced. He had been told to stop, to sit down, to let the grown-ups handle it. And he had refused, because he knew the truth didn't care how old you were. Justice didn't wait for permission, and courage didn't come from size. It came from conviction. In his hand, the bracelet felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of everything it had come to represent. A girl silenced, a truth buried, a boy who wouldn't let them be forgotten. He held it higher, letting the light hit it fully. The charm sparkled, faint but defiant. Like him, a few feet away, Officer Ramirez leaned silently against a tree, watching. She didn't approach, didn't interrupt. She knew this wasn't her moment, it was his. The boy who had refused to back down. The boy who had brought down a killer, exposed a conspiracy, and forced a system to look itself in the mirror. Eli opened his eyes again, squinting slightly against the light. His face was calm, but not soft. There was a fire behind those eyes, banked for now, but burning, because he knew there would be more like Alyssa, more like Rachel, more like Marcus, and more people who wouldn't believe them. But now the world had heard his voice. Now they knew, and he would never let them forget. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the faint scent of sun-warmed earth and fallen leaves. Eli turned and walked slowly down the path, the bracelet still in his hand, the sky still blazing above him. The fight was over. But the mission had only just begun. If Eli's story made your heart race, if it reminded you that even the smallest voice can shatter silence and bring the powerful to justice, don't let it end here. In a world where injustice lurks in every shadow, we need courage like Eli's more than ever. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and join us as we uncover more real-life battles where truth fights to be heard. Because sometimes it takes just one brave soul to stand up and change everything. Your support keeps these voices alive. Be part of the journey. Be part of the fight. Arrogant judge mocks teen, shocked when he outsmarts the entire courtroom. The courtroom was suffocating, not from heat, but from judgment. The heavy oak doors had barely closed when all eyes turned to him, and not a single one looked kind. 17-year-old Malik Carter stood alone before the towering bench, drowning in a suit 2 sizes too big. His older brothers, worn to interviews that led nowhere. Now it was Malik's armor, though it felt more like a costume meant to mock him. His fists clenched to stop the shaking. His chest rose too fast. The polished floor mirrored his fear. Weeks of studying, sleepless nights, and desperate hope now teetered on the edge of unraveling, under the crushing weight of silent contempt. Then came her voice. "Mr. Carter," said Judge Hawthorne, her tone laced with mockery so thick it echoed louder than the gavel she hadn't even raised yet. She was in her late 50s, white, with glasses perched at the tip of her nose, and a permanent scowl that made the deep lines in her face seem carved by years of judgment. She looked him over like she was inspecting a smudge on glass. "You're representing yourself?" She leaned forward slightly. "Do you think this is a game?" A wave of laughter rippled through the courtroom gallery. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cruel, the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than a shout. Somewhere in the back, someone scoffed. Another whispered, "He's gonna crash and burn." The guard by the wall tried to stifle a smirk. From the prosecution's table, Assistant District Attorney Reynolds let out a low chuckle. His suit was pressed, his tie perfectly straight, and his face carried the calm smugness of someone who'd already written his victory speech. "Your Honor," he said with a glance at Malik, "I would strongly advise the defendant to reconsider. He's facing felony charges, not a high school debate." Malik swallowed hard. His heart thundered, but then he raised his chin. "I'm aware of the charges, Your Honor," he said, his voice steadying with each word, "and I've chosen to defend myself because I believe in the truth." The room fell silent, not out of respect, but disbelief. A 17-year-old black boy in an oversized suit claiming he could go up against a trained prosecutor in a courtroom designed to eat him alive? They didn't just doubt him, they resented him for daring to believe he had a chance. Judge Hawthorne exhaled as if Malik's words exhausted her. "Well," she said, tapping her gavel once, "this will be interesting." Interesting. That was the word people used right before they watched a car crash. Malik could feel it in the air, the weight of expectation that he would fail. They weren't here to see justice. They were here to see a spectacle. A kid drowning in legal language he couldn't possibly understand. A boy deluded enough to think knowledge could save him from the system designed to ignore him. But Malik didn't flinch, because behind the shaking hands and the too large blazer was a fire, burning bright, slow, and unforgiving. He knew what they saw when they looked at him. Poor, young, black, easy target, guilty before proven innocent. He'd seen it in the eyes of teachers, police officers, shop owners. He knew the weight of being judged without speaking a word. But today he would speak. Today he would force them to listen. He turned toward the jury. 12 strangers who looked at him like a child lost in a world meant for adults. But Malik wasn't lost. He was exactly where he needed to be. "I'm not here because I think I'm smarter than anyone," he said. "I'm here because I couldn't find anyone who believed I was worth defending." A sharp intake of breath. Somewhere someone stopped taking notes. Malik continued, his voice firm now. "I didn't choose this because it's easy. I chose this because if I don't fight for myself, no one will." The judge shifted in her chair. The prosecutor's smirk faded just a little. The air in the courtroom, once thick with dismissal, now felt charged, like the first rumble before a storm. Malik was no longer just a boy in a courtroom. He was a spark in a dry forest. The courtroom lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting sharp shadows across Officer Meyer's stiff uniform as he took the stand. His posture was rigid, arms crossed tightly as if daring anyone to challenge him. The badge on his chest gleamed under the fluorescent glare, and his eyes, cold, pale, unflinching, locked on Malik Carter like he was prey. "The night of the incident," Myers began, voice low and authoritative, "I responded to a 911 call reporting suspicious activity around a black sedan parked in a residential alley. When I arrived at approximately 10:04 p.m., I saw the defendant." He motioned toward Malik, not bothering to hide his disdain, leaning into the driver's side window, clearly attempting to tamper with the vehicle's ignition. When I announced myself and ordered him to stop, he immediately fled the scene. I pursued on foot and apprehended him roughly 3 blocks away. Gas fluttered across the gallery. The jury sat up straighter. Malik sat motionless at the defense table, his pen still, eyes fixed on Myers. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just listened. "To be clear," the prosecutor asked, stepping forward, "you are certain the defendant was attempting to steal the car?" "Without a doubt," Myers said. "He was actively fiddling with wires. Looked like he was trying to hotwire it." The words settled like a heavy fog across the room. Malik's heart beat against his ribs like a war drum, but his expression never changed. He leaned forward slightly, scribbling something onto his notepad. One word, distance. When the prosecutor finished, Judge Hawthorne turned to Malik. "Mr. Carter, you may begin your cross-examination." The room shifted. The atmosphere was different now. Tense. Watching a kid question a veteran cop wasn't something anyone expected to be interesting. But Malik stood up, buttoned his oversized blazer, and walked slowly toward the witness stand. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. "Officer Myers," he began, his voice calm and controlled. "You said you arrived at the scene at 10:04 p.m. and observed me attempting to tamper with the car. Is that correct?" "That's right. And how far were you from me when you made this observation?" Myers didn't hesitate. "About 25 feet. 25 feet, Malek repeated, nodding slowly. "And this was at 10 o'clock at night?" "Yes. No streetlights in that alley, correct?" "There were none directly overhead," Myers admitted, "but my flashlight was on." Malik walked back to the defense table, picked up a manila folder, and returned to the stand. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out a large photograph and held it up for the courtroom to see. "This," he said, "is a photo of the alley where the black sedan was parked, taken the morning after the incident." He handed it to the officer, then held up a second image for the jury. Same angle, wide shot. "Officer Myers," Malik said, "can you point to where you were standing when you first saw me?" Myers pointed at the far end of the photo. Malik circled the spot with a red marker. "And the car, here?" he asked, pointing at the other end. "Yes," Myers confirmed. Malik turned to the jury, his voice rising ever so slightly. "From 25 feet away, in the dark, with no overhead lights, and yet Officer Myers claims he saw me fiddling with wires inside the dashboard of this vehicle." He walked closer to the witness stand, lowered his tone. "Officer, are you familiar with the make and model of that car?" "I believe it was a 2009 Honda Civic," Myers said. "Perfect," Malik said. He pulled out a printed diagram of the car's interior. "Then you'll know that in this model, the ignition wires are not visible unless the lower panel of the dashboard is removed. That requires opening the driver's door and crouching down, none of which you mentioned." Myers shifted slightly in his seat. "So my question is, how exactly did you see me tampering with wires that are inside the dashboard, in near total darkness, from 25 feet away?" The silence was instant and deafening. Myers' lips pressed together. "I saw your hands moving near the steering wheel," he muttered. "Near," Malik echoed. "But you told this court, under oath, that I was fiddling with wires. That's a very specific detail, officer." Reynolds stood abruptly. "Objection. Badgering the witness." "Sustained," Judge Hawthorne said. But her eyes were locked on Malik now. Not with mockery, but curiosity. Malik didn't let up. He turned to the jury again, voice steady and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've all seen crime shows. We all know what it looks like when someone hotwires a car. But this isn't television. This is reality. And in reality, a police officer who's 30 feet away, in the dark, with no visual access to the dashboard, cannot possibly see what he claims he saw." A few jurors nodded slightly, but not everyone was convinced. From the gallery, someone scoffed quietly. A man in a business suit leaned over and whispered something to the woman next to him. One of the jurors crossed her arms and frowned. Malik felt it. Doubt still lingered. His truth was starting to cut through the lies, but the scars of prejudice ran deep. He could see it in their eyes. They were beginning to hear him, but they hadn't yet decided to believe him. Still, he pressed forward. "Officer Myers," he said, voice low again, "did you have a body cam on during this incident?" "No," Myers replied. "It was under maintenance that week." No dash cam footage from your vehicle? No. No other witnesses? None. Malik took a breath, letting the tension in the room stretch thin like glass. So, let me get this straight, he said. You claim to have seen me committing a felony from a distance of 25 feet, in darkness, through a closed window, into a dashboard that was never opened, without a single recording or corroborating witness to support your statement. Myers clenched his jaw. No further questions, Your Honor, Malik said, walking back to his seat. He sat down slowly. His knees ached from the tension. His hands were still shaking beneath the table. But the silence in the courtroom wasn't mockery this time. It was something else. Doubt. For the first time since the trial began, they weren't so sure he was guilty after all. The next witness took the stand with a stiff back and pursed lips. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, middle-aged, expensively dressed, and radiating entitlement, sat down like the courtroom owed her comfort. Her pearl earrings shimmered beneath the harsh lights as she folded her hands neatly in her lap. Casting a fleeting glance at Malik that held no sympathy, only silent accusation. The prosecutor wasted no time. Mrs. Whitman, can you describe what happened the night your car was allegedly stolen? She nodded primly. Yes, I parked my car, a black 2009 Honda Civic, in front of my house at approximately 9:30 p.m. I locked it, as I always do. When I came out the next morning, it was gone. I called the police immediately. And you had no idea who might have taken it? The prosecutor asked. None, she replied flatly, casting another look at Malik. Until they told me he was found inside it. The jury turned toward Malik, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. The story was clean, simple, too simple. Malik sat still. His face betrayed nothing, but inside his pulse was pounding. The prosecutor continued. Was there any damage to your car? Broken windows, forced locks? Anything unusual? Mrs. Whitman shook her head. No, nothing. That's what surprised me the most. The doors weren't damaged, and the ignition was untouched. It looked exactly as I'd left it. A low murmur rose in the gallery. The prosecutor raised his voice above it. No further questions. Judge Hawthorne turned to Malik. Mr. Carter, your cross-examination. Malik rose slowly, calmly. He walked to the center of the courtroom and looked directly at Mrs. Whitman. The pressure in the room tightened. Mrs. Whitman, he began, you said your car was locked, is that correct? Yes. And there were no signs of forced entry? No. Malik took a step closer. Then how exactly do you believe I got inside? She blinked, clearly caught off guard. I don't know. Maybe he had tools or something. Tools, Malik repeated, nodding. Did the police find any tools on me? She hesitated. I don't know. They didn't, Malik said sharply, turning to the jury. No tools, no broken windows, no forced locks. And yet I'm here, charged with grand theft auto, based solely on the fact that I was inside the car. He stepped to the evidence table and lifted a photograph of the vehicle, pointing to the intact driver's side door. If I broke in, how did I do it without leaving a trace, without setting off the alarm, without leaving a fingerprint? The courtroom was silent, all eyes on him now. Malik turned back to Mrs. Whitman. Are you absolutely certain no one else, no family member, had access to the vehicle that night? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Just for a second, the mask of certainty cracked. The courtroom door creaked open again. All heads turned as a man stepped in, shoulders slightly hunched, his face pale beneath thinning gray hair. He looked like someone who had never expected to be part of this trial, someone who wanted nothing more than to disappear. Dressed in khakis and a wrinkled dress shirt, Mr. Whitman walked slowly toward the witness stand, avoiding eye contact with his wife, who now sat rigid in her seat, jaw clenched so tight her cheekbones sharpened like blades. Malik stood motionless as the man was sworn in. This was it, the moment that could change everything or nothing. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, proceed. Malik nodded once, then approached the stand. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Mr. Whitman, please state your relation to Mrs. Eleanor Whitman. She's my wife, he said quietly. And you are also the co-owner of the black Honda Civic involved in this case? Yes. On the night in question, did you lend that vehicle to anyone? Mr. Whitman shifted. His fingers twitched. Yes, I let my nephew borrow it. Troy, a loud gasp erupted from the back row of the courtroom. Eleanor's eyes widened in shock, and her lips parted in horror, but no sound came out. Malik's gaze stayed fixed on the man in the witness chair. Let me be clear, he said. You gave your nephew the keys to the car? Yes, Mr. Whitman replied, now visibly sweating. He asked to borrow it for a date. I didn't think it was a big deal. And did you inform your wife about this arrangement? No, he muttered. I didn't. Why not? Mr. Whitman hesitated. He looked like a man walking toward his own execution. Then finally he exhaled. Because I didn't want to fight with her. She doesn't like him much. Thought he was irresponsible. Malik paused. His eyes flicked toward the jury. So to avoid an argument, you withheld the truth. The man nodded. Did you tell the police that your nephew had permission to use the car? No. Why? A beat, then quietly. I didn't think it would come to this. The words hung in the air like a noose. Malik stepped away from the witness stand and turned toward the courtroom, his voice rising with a fierce clarity that cut through the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, this trial has been built on the assumption that I stole a vehicle, that I intended to commit a crime. But now we know the truth. The car was never stolen. It was borrowed, with permission, from the legal co-owner. He took a few steps toward the jury box, his gaze burning into the eyes staring back at him. And yet, I was arrested, dragged into a system that didn't ask questions, that didn't investigate, that didn't even try to understand, because it's easier, safer, to throw the blame on someone like me. He pointed at himself, a 17-year-old kid, black, alone, wearing a hand-me-down suit and standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth long held back. I wasn't arrested because I was guilty. I was arrested because I was convenient, because this system doesn't need facts. It just needs a target. And too often, that target looks exactly like me. The room was dead quiet. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. The prosecutor looked like he'd swallowed glass. Mrs. Whitman was frozen in her seat, face drained of all color. Her husband refused to look at her. Malik took one final breath and delivered the sentence that had lived inside him since the day he was thrown into the back of that police car. I was arrested not because of what I did, but because of who I am. He returned to the defense table, but the tension didn't leave with him. It clung to the air, heavy and electric, like a storm hovering just beyond the courthouse walls. Still, no one moved. The jury sat paralyzed, not by confusion, but by the realization that everything they'd been led to believe was starting to collapse. That the confident officer, the polished prosecutor, the weeping car owner, they had all painted a picture with missing colors. And Malik had filled in the rest. But even now, despite the truth laid bare, Malik knew it wasn't over. Not even close. Because the truth wasn't always enough. Not when the system had already decided what it wanted to see. He looked down at his hands still trembling beneath the table. Around him, the courtroom began to stir. Chairs creaked, someone coughed, the judge scribbled something on her notepad, but the doubt still lingered. The fear still pressed against his chest like a weight. Because even after exposing the lie, he still wasn't free. And just when Malik thought the truth had finally pierced through the web of assumptions, revealing the car had never been stolen, the prosecution clung to one last thread. A grainy surveillance video they claimed would seal his fate. The lights in the courtroom dimmed as the bailiff rolled in a TV monitor and wheeled it to the center of the room. All eyes followed the grainy footage now flickering to life on the screen. Static danced briefly, then settled into a poorly lit alley captured by a fixed surveillance camera. The timestamp read 10:03 p.m. Rain drizzled in the frame like static falling from the sky. And then it happened. A shadowy figure entered from the left, walking briskly toward a parked black Honda Civic. The person glanced around, tugged at the door, slipped inside. A few seconds passed. Then the figure leaned toward the front console and ducked out of view. That was it. No clear face, No defining feature. Just a hooded figure moving in and out of the shadows. A blurry silhouette under a street lamp too far away to matter. When the footage ended, the courtroom was filled with the low hum of the monitor. Then silence. Heavy, expectant. Detective Langford, a large man with tired eyes and a thinning mustache, took the witness stand. He folded his hands over his stomach, as if he had already decided this was routine. Just another step in a process designed to crush people like Malik. The prosecutor stood. Detective Langford, you're the lead investigator on this case, correct? I am. And is this the footage obtained from a local security camera near the scene of the alleged crime? Yes, it is. Does this footage match the defendant's timeline of events? The detective nodded. The timing lines up. The figure in the video enters the vehicle around the same time the suspect was apprehended nearby. And does that figure match the general description of Mr. Malik Carter? Langford shifted slightly. In terms of height and build? Yes. Thank you, detective. The prosecutor turned and sat down with the kind of smugness that suggested this was a slam dunk. Judge Hawthorne looked toward Malik. Mr. Carter, your cross-examination. Malik rose slowly. This time there was something different in his movement. Measured, controlled, like he was stepping into fire without flinching. He approached the stand. Detective Langford, I want to go back to the video we just watched. He motioned to the still frame frozen on the screen, an unclear shot of the hooded figure leaning into the car. Yes? Would you agree that the footage is less than perfect? Langford frowned. It's not the best quality, no. Would you say it's clear enough to make a facial identification? A pause, then a reluctant shake of the head. No, the face isn't visible. Malik nodded. So you cannot say with certainty that the person in the video is me. I can't say with absolute certainty, no, Langford admitted, shifting in his chair. But you can say the person's face isn't visible at all. Yes. Malik walked over to the jury, letting that answer hang in the air. So the state's strongest piece of evidence is a blurry video where no face can be seen, just a vague shape, a shape that could belong to 100 people in this courtroom. The tension spiked again. Several jurors leaned forward. Malik turned back to Langford. Detective, are you aware that Mr. and Mrs. Whitman's nephew, Troy, borrowed that same car the night of the incident? Langford looked unsettled. I learned that during this trial, yes. Would you say that Troy fits a similar height and build to mine? Langford hesitated. I suppose he could. Then, based on your own testimony, isn't it possible that the person in the video is Troy? Langford didn't answer immediately. He looked at the judge, then at the prosecutor. It's possible, he muttered. A few people in the courtroom gasped audibly. The prosecutor's face tensed. Malik's voice didn't rise, but the energy behind it grew sharper. So we have a vehicle that wasn't stolen, a figure on tape that no one can identify, and yet I'm the one handcuffed, tried, and dragged through this system like a criminal. He paused, waiting for anyone to object. No one did. But just as the tide seemed to be turning, Judge Hawthorne raised a hand. Mr. Carter, she interrupted, her voice as sharp as glass. Let's not forget, regardless of the vehicle's status, there remains the issue of resisting arrest. You fled from a police officer. You ran. Would you care to explain that to the court? The silence returned, colder this time. Malik's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, all the progress he had clawed for felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He looked around the room. The jury, the judge, the press. His mother in the back, gripping her rosary beads so tightly her knuckles turned white. The fight wasn't over. It had barely begun. The video hadn't cleared him. It had only proved what he already knew. The truth alone would never be enough. Because the system didn't care about clarity. It cared about control. And control meant silencing boys like Malik the moment they stepped out of line. He turned back to the judge, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of someone forced to fight battles he never asked for. Yes, Your Honor, he said. I'll explain. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Malik could feel the weight of every eye on him, the tension so thick it clung to his skin like sweat. He stood alone. No lawyer, no advisor, No one but himself and the truth that had been clawing its way up from the pit of his chest since the night his life changed. Judge Hawthorne leaned forward. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind, "you've addressed the allegations surrounding the vehicle. Now explain to this court why, when a police officer ordered you to stop, you ran." This was it, the final noose, the last rope tying him to guilt in their eyes. Malik took a breath. His voice, when it came, was quiet, too quiet at first. But as he spoke, it grew stronger, layered with pain, defiance, and something deeper. Truth. "I ran," he said, "because I thought I was going to die." The words stunned the room. Somewhere in the gallery, someone gasped. The prosecutor shifted uneasily in his chair. Malik turned to the jury, his eyes scanning the faces that still held questions, still clung to doubt. "The man who chased me, he didn't announce himself as a police officer. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't show a badge. All I saw was a large man sprinting toward me in the dark, yelling and grabbing for something on his belt." He paused, the memory flashing behind his eyes. "Where I come from," he continued, "that's not law enforcement. That's danger. That's how kids like me end up in morgues with no explanations, just assumptions." The judge didn't interrupt. No one did. Not now. Malik's tone hardened. "You want to know what ran through my mind that night? It wasn't escape. It wasn't guilt. It was survival. I thought someone was about to hurt me, maybe rob me, maybe worse. And I reacted the way I've been taught to react my whole life. Run first, survive second, explain if you're still breathing." He gripped the edge of the witness stand, knuckles white. "I didn't flee from justice. I fled from fear." The room was still, breathless. He let the silence linger before continuing. "Let me paint the picture clearer for you," he said. "It's late. I'm alone. I find a car I recognize from earlier. A car I was told to return. I go to check it. A man appears out of nowhere. No flashing lights, no sirens, no uniform. Just him, running at me. Would you have stayed?" His words landed like punches, heavy, director. "True. And when I was tackled," he added, "he still didn't say anything. He cuffed me, slammed me into the pavement, told me I was under arrest after he pinned my face to the ground." He looked down at his hands, still scarred from the asphalt that night. "This system," he said, voice cracking, "it didn't pause to ask why. It didn't care about how I saw the world. It just saw me running, and that was enough." He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. "You know what's the worst part? If I hadn't run, and he hadn't been a cop, I might not be standing here at all. I might be lying 6 feet under, and no one would be asking questions. Just another headline. Just another mistake." Malik stepped back, turning once more to the jury. "You see a charge called resisting arrest. I see a survival instinct born from years of watching people who look like me get buried without answers." He didn't yell. He didn't cry. But every word echoed through the chamber like thunder. "I didn't run from justice," he repeated. "I ran from a threat I couldn't identify. And the only reason I'm here is because I had the luck. Not the right, the luck to survive that moment." The room was frozen in time. Even the judge, who had maintained an iron mask throughout the trial, seemed shaken. Her pen hovered above the paper in front of her, but didn't move. The court reporter's fingers slowed on the keys. No one spoke. No one could. Because for the first time in the trial, the truth wasn't just spoken, it was felt. It clung to the walls. It filled the air. It wrapped itself around the jury and the spectators, and even the bailiff standing motionless by the door. But the most heartbreaking part of it all, it still wasn't enough. Malik could see it. The flickers of sympathy, yes. The flickers of doubt, sure. But not the fire of justice. Not yet. Because in that courtroom, even the rawest truth had to fight for space. Even pain needed permission to be believed. He sat back down, his breathing steady now. But his eyes still burned with the injustice of having to explain his own fear to people who had never once lived it. And across the room, the prosecutor shuffled his papers, already preparing the next strike. The fight wasn't over. The chains of assumption were still wrapped tightly around him. But Malik had done what most never could. He stood up to a system designed to silence him and made it listen. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. Malik rose slowly from his chair, feeling every eye in the courtroom settle on him like lasers piercing his skin. The silence was dense, the kind of quiet that grips your throat and refuses to let go. Judge Hawthorne raised a cautious eyebrow, watching carefully as Malik straightened his suit jacket. Still oversized, still borrowed, still worn at the seams. He cleared his throat softly. "Your Honor," Malik began, his voice unwavering despite the pressure pounding in his chest. "I'd like to testify as my own final witness." The judge leaned forward slightly, as if considering his request. Finally, she nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Carter." Malik took slow, deliberate steps toward the witness stand, each footfall echoing louder in his own ears. As he sat down and faced the courtroom, he felt strangely calm, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, fully aware that the only path forward was to leap. After swearing an oath to tell the truth, he steadied himself and raised his gaze directly toward the jury, meeting each of their eyes individually, searching for something: understanding, empathy, belief. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malik began quietly, his voice firm but gentle, "from the moment this case began, you've heard stories, seen evidence, listened to witnesses. But what you haven't heard yet is the truth from the person who lived it." He paused briefly, collecting his thoughts, steadying the emotions that threatened to bubble over. "From the second I was arrested, no one asked what really happened. No one gave me a chance to explain. Because the truth is, people like me, we're assumed guilty before we're given a chance to prove we're innocent." The tension in the courtroom thickened. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his watch. Malik pressed on, his voice stronger now, his confidence building. "When I was thrown into that police car," Malik continued, "all I could think was, why me? Not because I felt sorry for myself, but because I already knew the answer. I've grown up seeing this system from the outside. I've watched friends, neighbors, people who look like me, get swept up in accusations that turn into convictions before they can say a single word." He leaned forward, resting his elbows firmly on the wooden railing in front of him, eyes blazing with a raw intensity. "So when this happened to me, I made a decision. If no one else was going to fight for me, I'd learn how to fight for myself." A few jurors glanced at each other curiously, captivated by his growing passion. Malik took a deep breath, letting the truth flow freely. "I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have connections. But I had something else: a library card, internet access, and determination born from desperation. Every night since my arrest, I've stayed awake until sunrise, poring over law books, studying cases, learning every bit of legal jargon I could grasp. I didn't do it because I wanted to become some courtroom hero. I did it because it was the only way I could speak a language this system would listen to." His voice lowered slightly, becoming almost hypnotic in its conviction. "I read cases about justice denied, about lives lost to wrongful convictions, about innocent people imprisoned for decades. Every page I turned was a lesson about how broken things really are. But it also showed me something else. Each injustice started with assumptions, with prejudice, with the same silent judgments you all made when you first saw me standing here." He allowed his gaze to sweep across the room, settling on the prosecutor for a brief second before returning to the jury. "I didn't steal that car, but in this courtroom, I've been forced to defend more than my innocence. I've had to defend my humanity. I've had to convince you that a black kid from a poor neighborhood could possibly tell the truth." Malik straightened his spine, lifting his chin defiantly. "I don't have a law degree, but the truth doesn't require credentials. Justice isn't exclusive to those who can afford it or understand its complexities. Justice is supposed to be about facts, about fairness, about hearing people out, not silencing them because of their age, or their skin color, or their zip code." He pointed directly at his chest. "If I, a 17-year-old black kid who society decided was guilty before even asking, can sit down, study, investigate, and uncover facts that trained detectives and prosecutors somehow missed. What does that say about the system itself? Malik paused, the silence now filled with unspoken agreement, quiet reflection, hesitant introspection. He lowered his voice to nearly a whisper, forcing the courtroom to lean closer. This trial isn't just about me. It's about a pattern, one we've ignored far too long. If I wasn't here defending myself, how many of you would have walked out of this courtroom assuming I was exactly who they said I was? He shook his head slowly. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending everything is fine when innocent lives are hanging by threads. If I, someone with no power, no money, no training, can uncover truth, then the professionals in this system have no excuse. Something has to change. Malik took another deep breath, feeling the weight of every word he'd spoken settle over him. He leaned back slightly, his eyes softening, yet still fierce with determination. Maybe you think this isn't your fight, he said gently. Maybe you think I'm just one kid, one case, one small voice in a sea of bigger problems. But every injustice we tolerate becomes our legacy. Every silence we choose becomes our story. If today you listen and still find me guilty, you're not just condemning me. You're saying that a kid like me has no right to justice at all. His voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through for the first time. I believe in truth. I believe in justice. Not because I've seen enough of it, but because I've seen so little. And if today I can stand here, telling you this, forcing you to think, then maybe tomorrow the next kid who stands here won't have to fight quite so hard. Malik rose slowly from the stand, walking back toward his seat. No one spoke. No one moved. His words hovered in the air, echoing silently through every heart and mind in the courtroom. As Malik sat down, the judge stared at him thoughtfully, her pen still frozen above the paper she'd been holding. Even the prosecutor was quiet, eyes cast downward, unable to deny the force of Malik's conviction. In that moment, the verdict was unknown. The jury remained unreadable, their decision still hanging in the balance. But Malik had done what few others had ever managed. He'd forced a courtroom full of strangers to confront the harshest truths of their own beliefs. He knew justice was never guaranteed. But right now, in this silence, he'd made them see him as human. And sometimes, Malik thought, his heart pounding fiercely beneath his ribs, seeing humanity clearly, just for an instant, could be the first step toward justice. He straightened his jacket again, feeling its oversized sleeves brushing his fingertips. He glanced upward, silently asking the universe for strength as he awaited the jury's final judgment. But no matter their decision, Malik Carter had already claimed his victory. Because in a system that thrived on silence, he'd refused to be quiet. Malik Carter sat motionless, every nerve ending in his body pulsing with raw anticipation. The courtroom felt impossibly small, suffocatingly crowded as the jury filed solemnly back into their seats. The clock's ticking was deafeningly loud, each second magnified by the weight of the moment. Malik's heart thundered relentlessly in his chest, a rhythmic drumbeat of hope and fear interwoven. His breaths were shallow but steady, his eyes unwaveringly locked on the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? Judge Hawthorne's voice sliced through the silence, clear and authoritative. The foreman, a man in his early 50s, with graying hair and deep lines of contemplation etched into his face, rose deliberately. We have, Your Honor. Please read the verdict. The man unfolded a piece of paper, the crisp sound cutting sharply through the tense silence. He cleared his throat and read, In the case of the state versus Malik Carter, on the charge of grand theft auto, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. An audible gasp rippled through the courtroom, a sudden storm of whispered disbelief. Malik's heart skipped, then hammered faster, adrenaline flooding his veins. On the charge of resisting arrest, the foreman continued, his voice slightly firmer, carrying the weight of moral conviction. We also find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom exploded in murmurs of astonishment. Malik's mother, seated in the far row, pressed trembling fingers to her lips, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Malik himself sat frozen, momentarily unable to fully grasp the words he'd just heard. Not guilty. The two words echoed inside his mind, surreal and powerful. The prosecutor sank into his chair, shoulders slumping heavily, eyes fixed blankly on the table before him. The facade of confident arrogance he'd worn throughout the trial cracked visibly, replaced by quiet defeat. He had expected an easy victory, another conviction to bolster his record, but now faced an overwhelming public failure. Malik finally exhaled, his breath ragged with relief, disbelief, and an overwhelming surge of vindication. Yet beneath that relief lingered a deep-rooted bitterness, knowing the odds he'd faced, the prejudices he'd had to dismantle, and the injustice he'd narrowly escaped. Judge Hawthorne struck her gavel firmly, silencing the courtroom instantly. Her stern eyes swept over the assembly, ensuring their silence before speaking clearly, firmly. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Carter, you are hereby cleared of all charges. You are free to go." Slowly, shakily, Malik rose from his seat. The surreal nature of the moment left him dizzy, as though waking from a nightmare that had held him captive for too long. As he stepped hesitantly into the aisle, unsure of his next move, he felt a hand lightly touch his shoulder. Turning, he found Judge Hawthorne standing beside him, her expression surprisingly gentle, softened by respect. Her voice was low, meant only for his ears. "Mr. Carter," she began sincerely, "in all my years presiding over this courtroom, I've rarely encountered someone as courageous or determined as you. You didn't just prove your innocence today. You illuminated flaws deeply embedded within our system." Malik listened intently, still breathless from the overwhelming turn of events. The judge continued, her voice filled with unmistakable admiration. "This courtroom, this entire system, needs individuals who have your insight, your integrity, and your willingness to challenge injustice. Have you considered studying law professionally?" Malik hesitated momentarily, taken aback by the genuine encouragement from the woman who had initially seemed so distant and skeptical. Judge Hawthorne noticed his uncertainty and offered him a faint, encouraging smile. "Consider it seriously. The justice system desperately needs people like you, Malik. People who understand what it's like to stand alone against prejudice. People who refuse to accept injustice as inevitable." Her words resonated deeply with Malik, striking chords of purpose and clarity within him. For the first time in months, his future felt defined not by limits, but by possibilities. "Thank you," Malik replied softly, his voice sincere, eyes bright with newfound resolve. "I'll think about it." She nodded firmly, stepping back to her bench as the courtroom began to empty, filled with the low hum of conversation. Reporters gathered near the doors, preparing to broadcast the unexpected outcome to the world. Malik turned toward the exit, feeling a strange sensation of freedom intertwined with responsibility. Outside, he knew challenges still awaited, prejudices still thrived, and injustices still festered. Yet now he saw himself clearly, a force capable of igniting change, driven by truth, resilience, and courage. Walking slowly toward his waiting mother, Malik embraced her tightly. Her tears soaked into his jacket as she whispered words of pride and relief. Around them, sunlight filtered gently through courthouse windows, illuminating his path forward. As Malik stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, he paused, inhaling deeply, savoring the fresh, unburdened sensation of true freedom. Ahead lay a long, uncertain journey, but now he faced it armed not only with his own hard-won innocence, but also with a powerful purpose forged by injustice overcome. He knew now, more clearly than ever, that this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. Malik stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching the sunlight pour down onto the marble facade, each golden ray warming his skin, but failing to soothe the cold anger that still simmered beneath the surface. Even in victory, the pain lingered, a quiet storm of injustice that had battered him relentlessly. Voices echoed distantly as reporters crowded the sidewalk below, their questions a muffled buzz he chose to ignore. All he felt now was the sharp, crystal clarity of freedom and the heavy burden of knowing just how easily it had almost been taken away. As Malik took a deep breath, preparing to descend the stairs, he noticed a figure moving slowly toward him through the dispersing crowd. He squinted slightly, sunlight blurring his vision momentarily before recognizing Troy Whitman. The older teenager approached cautiously, his footsteps hesitant, eyes filled with deep remorse. Troy's gaze met Malik's briefly before dropping downward. He stopped a few feet away, shoulders hunched, his posture one of unmistakable regret. Malik studied Troy quietly, seeing a young man burdened by shame, embarrassment, and guilt. Troy's hands trembled as he pushed them into his jacket pockets, struggling to summon words. "Malik, I don't even know what to say, man," Troy began haltingly, his voice barely audible, choked by genuine emotion. "I never meant any of this to happen to you. I had no idea things would escalate this way." Malik remained silent at first, allowing Troy space to confront the gravity of the moment. Though fury had burned within him through endless sleepless nights, he saw clearly that Troy was not his true enemy. Malik's real adversary was much larger, far more insidious. A system designed to punish first, ask questions later. "I borrowed the car that night," Troy continued softly, guilt evident in every word. "My uncle told me it was fine, but I never mentioned it to anyone else. When you got arrested, I panicked. I knew I should have spoken up sooner, but I was scared, man. Scared of disappointing people, scared of consequences, but most of all, ashamed that my silence put you through hell." Malik watched carefully, recognizing sincerity in Troy's tear-filled eyes. Troy's remorse was raw, tangible, unmistakable. Yet Malik knew even this deep remorse couldn't undo the harm already inflicted upon him. Troy shook his head slowly, a heavy sigh escaping him. "I know it doesn't change what happened. Nothing can fix the damage already done. But please, Malik, just know how deeply sorry I am." Malik finally moved closer, his expression softening slightly, though intensity still burned behind his gaze. He placed a reassuring hand on Troy's shoulder, startling the older boy with the gentleness of the gesture. "Listen, Troy." Malik spoke softly but powerfully, each word deliberately chosen. "This was never truly your fault." Troy's eyes lifted abruptly, confusion crossing his face. "How can you say that? If I'd spoken sooner, if I'd done the right thing, you wouldn't have been dragged through this nightmare." Malik nodded patiently. "Maybe, but your silence wasn't what truly convicted me in their eyes. The moment I was arrested, they already believed I was guilty. They saw a young black kid and decided my innocence didn't matter. The system needed someone to blame, and I was convenient." Troy's expression shifted slowly from confusion to understanding. Malik's words resonated deeply, piercing the guilt-ridden fog clouding Troy's mind. "You really believe that?" Troy asked softly, almost whispering. "That even if I'd come forward earlier, they still would have tried to convict you?" Malik's eyes burned brighter now, conviction blazing. "I know it. The injustice wasn't just about the stolen car. It was about who they decided I was the moment they saw me. My guilt was decided by their assumptions, not your silence. You were trapped by fear. I was trapped by prejudice." Troy stood silently, absorbing the profound weight of Malik's truth. The world seemed quieter now, as though even nature itself had paused to hear the exchange. Malik continued calmly, his voice unwavering and passionate. "This isn't about blame, not yours anyway. It's about a broken system that forces people like us into impossible positions. It's about laws applied selectively, about privilege deciding who gets believed and who gets punished. You were afraid, Troy, because you understand how quickly things can spiral, how mercilessly the system crushes those caught within it." Troy's eyes welled with fresh tears, nodding slowly. "But what can we do? How do we change something so massive, so ingrained?" Malik's expression hardened again, resolve stealing his posture. "We start by refusing to stay silent. We speak truth even when our voices shake. We confront injustice whenever we see it, not just when it affects us directly. We demand change from those with power, and we refuse to accept anything less than real justice." Troy exhaled slowly, visibly inspired by Malik's strength. "You really think it's possible?" Malik smiled slightly, fierce determination illuminating his youthful features. If I can stand here, victorious after all they threw at me, then yes, anything is possible. But it's going to take more than just me. It's going to take everyone who's tired of seeing lives shattered, futures stolen, and voices silenced. Troy extended his hand slowly, genuinely, humbled by Malik's wisdom and compassion. Malik clasped it firmly, understanding passing wordlessly between them. The moment was quiet yet powerful, hope sparking vividly between two young men who had both suffered from a system designed to separate, silence, and punish. Malik spoke softly once more, reassuringly. I forgive you, Troy, but please don't carry this guilt forward. Use this pain as motivation. Help make sure no one else suffers what we endured. That's how we honor this struggle. Troy nodded earnestly, understanding completely. I will, Malik. I promise. Malik stepped back slowly, feeling a profound sense of peace despite the battle still looming ahead. The sun now seemed brighter, warmer somehow, illuminating clearly the path forward, a path toward justice, accountability, and profound systemic change. He watched Troy retreat slowly down the courthouse steps, disappearing into the bustling crowd below. Malik stood tall, feeling stronger now than ever before. He had survived a harrowing journey, faced a system built against him, and emerged not merely innocent, but awakened to a larger purpose. The fight wasn't over, not by any means, but standing on those steps, free and determined, Malik Carter knew exactly where his destiny lay. In challenging, dismantling, and rebuilding the very foundations of justice. He turned slowly, descending the courthouse stairs with confident strides. His eyes fixed firmly ahead, his spirit unbreakable, his heart driven by a burning commitment to truth. Malik Carter wasn't just free, he was empowered, and the fight for justice had found its newest, fiercest advocate. He knew now more clearly than ever before. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Malik Carter's journey from falsely accused teenager to a voice of unflinching truth reveals a human lesson about justice, empathy, and resilience. From his first night in a holding cell, he confronted a system that deemed him guilty before he spoke. His ordeal wasn't isolated. It reflected a deeper structural unfairness woven through countless courtrooms. Yet at every turn, he chose courage over despair and knowledge over resignation. By studying law books and refusing to plead out, Malik became a testament to self-advocacy and the unbreakable human spirit. Suspicion clung to him like a shadow. Many in his position would have bowed to hopelessness, but Malik refused to yield. He believed that understanding the law would help him escape the snare of false charges. Each piece of contradictory evidence he uncovered illuminated a relentless commitment to truth. He never let jeers or scorn deter him, and his struggle affirmed that no institution should go unquestioned when it targets the vulnerable. Malik also faced indifference from people who saw him as a statistic. They assumed his protests of innocence were an act, ignoring actual facts. His story underscores a grim reality. Far too many communities are forced to fight an uphill battle just to be presumed innocent. Yet Malik refused to let cynicism bury his hope. He pushed on, proving that persistence could crack the walls of prejudice. His nerves were tested, from humiliating interrogations to condescending remarks by the prosecution. But at each point, he clung to an unshakable sense of worth. Exposing flawed testimony and hidden biases, Malik tore open a wider wound, a legal structure that routinely fails to see the humanity of those it brands suspects. He showed how some demographics face stacked odds in court, where unspoken biases weigh as heavily as any evidence. Above all, Malik's efforts to challenge authority stand as a guiding light. His testimony wasn't just personal defense, it was a call for reform. By meticulously presenting facts, he forced everyone to confront how swiftly assumptions become verdicts. His story teaches that one determined voice can disrupt entrenched systems. That lesson resonates beyond the courthouse, inviting us to question who's being silenced everywhere else. He fought on two fronts, the formal accusations and social prejudice, revealing how daunting it is to prove innocence when society has already convicted you in its mind. Yet he did not lash out with hate. He channeled frustration into methodical legal research. learning that complex statutes can be navigated by anyone bold enough to try. The moral is twofold. First, injustice thrives where resignation reigns. Malik showed how knowledge and relentless truth-seeking can topple institutional arrogance. Second, empathy can reframe how we see both accused and accuser. If every jury, judge, and community member remembered the human story behind charges, we'd uphold innocent until proven guilty more sincerely. Malik's triumph wasn't about loopholes. It was honesty, logic, and righteous anger. The impact of his struggle serves as a warning to those content with the status quo. His resolute clarity made onlookers doubt the prosecution's convenient narrative. Even Judge Hawthorne, initially skeptical, urged him to pursue law. Through Malik, we realize that compassion can spark in unexpected corners if the truth is powerful enough. His story also reveals that injustice thrives in a culture of complicity. Police who arrested him saw a criminal, not a frightened teen. Witnesses who might have helped stayed silent. Media outlets sensationalized rather than investigated. Malik's battle became a push for accountability of police tactics, prosecutorial bias, and our willingness to accept a single story. He survived not just because of luck, but because he forced the world to see him. It reminds us how fragile innocence can be in a system where one detail could doom a person. Yet through it all, Malik refused cynicism. He used curiosity as an antidote to despair. That knowledge in the hands of the disenfranchised is a tool to expose illusions of untouchable authority. Another crucial piece is the solidarity that emerged when people witnessed the real Malik. Friends, family, and some unbiased observers grew outraged. A simple shift occurred. No longer a name on a docket, he was a teenager with fears, talents, and a right to fairness. That moment catalyzed broader reflections on biases, revealing the potential for communal awakening when confronted with raw truth. The message extends beyond a cautionary tale of wrongful accusation. It's a call to hold institutions accountable and challenge stereotypes. We must not let wealth, status, or race decide credibility. We must foster empathy in places where it's waning. True justice requires seeing the human being behind the allegations. Ultimately, Malik's triumph is more than personal. It's a catalyst for deeper conversations on fairness. A single, determined individual can highlight systemic cracks that many overlook. His voice soared with a plea. Treat me as a person, not a stereotype. Listen to evidence, not presumption. His defiance shattered illusions, propping up a biased case. Hence, the moral of his journey is that justice demands vigilance, bravery, and empathy. Real change arises from those with little power, but immense heart. His unwavering belief in his own truth overcame prejudice. Each carefully structured argument chipped away at prejudice's walls, leaving a beacon for anyone forced to stand alone. No victory stands alone, however. Malik's acquittal started broader dialogues about accountability, sowing resilience in those who watched him succeed. He proved that refusal to break can carve a path for others. His story is a testament to the unstoppable force of the human spirit, to confront oppression and reshape the narrative through intellect and compassion. May his resolve guide us all, especially when silence and despair tempt us to yield. If Malik's journey taught us anything, it's that every stand against authority can spark transformative flames. At the same time, Malik's story reminds us of the crucial role that collective empathy plays in unraveling systemic bias. Throughout his ordeal, he witnessed moments where individuals broke through their own ingrained assumptions. A guard who once sneered at him might pause to wonder how a teenager could bear such composure. A journalist might hesitate before writing a sensational headline, having glimpsed Malik's fear and resolve in his eyes. Tiny shifts in perception, when multiplied across a community, can form the groundswell needed to demand structural change. Indeed, Malik's journey should prompt every observer to ask themselves, if we were in his shoes, would we find the strength to speak up in a hostile environment? Would we master the legal labyrinth in mere weeks, risking everything for the faint hope that justice might emerge if the truth were laid bare? This question extends far beyond courtrooms. It touches on how neighborhoods treat their youth, how schools handle disciplinary measures, and how workplaces handle grievances. Each time a young person is automatically deemed trouble, A chain of events can unfold that changes the course of that life forever. By shining a light on these unseen turning points, Malik's experiences press us to reevaluate how quickly we dismiss young voices, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. If we can learn to listen sooner, to intervene with understanding rather than suspicion, perhaps fewer teenagers will ever have to stand alone in court, struggling against the tide of institutional indifference. Moreover, the subtle generosity shown by unexpected allies underscores the idea that no one is entirely powerless in this situation. The single mother who offered Malik a place to prepare his notes, the retired lawyer who shared a piece of crucial advice, the court clerk who accidentally revealed an inconsistency in the prosecution's paperwork, all these figures, however minor they seemed, became part of a fragile yet significant support network. Though the system itself felt monolithic, moments of kindness punctured that illusion, reminding us that institutions are composed of individuals whose decisions, good or bad, carry enormous consequences. By acknowledging our capacity to perform these small acts of support, we allow ourselves to become part of the solution, inching closer toward the version of justice that we claim to cherish. Malik's message rings especially powerful in a world where sensational narratives often overshadow nuanced truths. Social media might reduce a complex case to a clickbait headline. Politicians might leverage fears around crime for personal gain. Yet in Malik's journey, we see the necessity of depth, of looking beyond immediate assumptions and seeking the layers beneath. There is an inherent danger in letting superficial narratives dictate policy and public sentiment. Entire communities can be tarnished, entire generations demoralized, and entire families torn apart. By stripping away those simplistic frames, Malik forced everyone around him to confront uncomfortable realities, that none of us is immune to prejudice, that our biases can directly harm others, and that genuine accountability requires constant vigilance. Of course, the triumph of Malik's final acquittal is not an all-encompassing solution. Many face accusations without the resourcefulness or support that Malik discovered. Others lack even the basic literacy or financial stability to study their own case with the thoroughness he displayed. Hence, his victory is both inspirational and cautionary. It proves it is possible to overcome, but it also highlights how perilously narrow that path is. For every Malik who secures vindication, countless others remain lost in the labyrinth. The lesson here is not that the system works if one is determined enough, but that it often fails anyone without extraordinary resolve. We must therefore refuse complacency just because one individual overcame adversity. Instead, we should channel Malik's example into seeking reforms that ensure no one faces such harrowing odds to claim what should be guaranteed by law. If we look at Malik's story as a lens for broader societal critique, the common theme is how narratives can be weaponized, distorting reality so that society sees a suspect, not a child, an enemy, not an individual worthy of empathy. The shift occurs the moment we decide that certain groups are inherently more suspicious than others. At that point, an entire cascade of injustices becomes not just possible, but likely. From the day he entered that police station, Malik was battling more than a single accusation. He was battling centuries of ingrained bias, institutional inertia, and the human tendency to distrust those we perceive as different. While his ultimate victory reassures us that prejudice can be unmasked, it also tells us how fiercely we must guard against complacency if we hope to prevent such tragedies. Indeed, the moral weight of Malik's experience begs us to consider our personal spheres of influence. Whether as teachers, officers, neighbors, or co-workers, do we echo the system's bias by contributing to assumptions that label someone a lost cause? Do we fail to speak up when we witness misconduct, rationalizing that it's not our fight? The call to action embedded in Malik's tale is both simple and daunting. Challenge injustice wherever it appears, no matter how minor it may seem. Because what starts as a careless comment or an unfounded suspicion can spiral into a life-altering crisis for someone on the receiving end. The cost of silence is measured in real human lives and real human potential, both squandered. For those who find themselves, like Malik, staring down a system that seems determined to crush them, his story offers a blueprint of resistance. Arm yourself with knowledge. Seek the cracks in the armor of authority. Maintain composure when provoked, because rage can be used against you. But truth, calmly, repeatedly asserted, becomes undeniable. Most importantly, remember that every human institution can be challenged. The greatest danger lies in believing that we are powerless. Malik's unyielding stance rejects that notion, reminding us that as long as we can speak, we can refuse to let the official narrative define who we are or what we have done. In the context of such high stakes, the cinematic tension of Malik's fight for justice feels appropriate. Each revelation and contradiction builds suspense. Each small victory is overshadowed by the looming threat of a system that punishes with frightening speed. But in the end, the message he leaves us with transcends the courtroom drama.